Hey my friends, welcome back to the channel. I am Huck, and today we're gonna do a video that I got a little inspiration from something on my shelf over here, and that is this guy right here. I call this my Count Rushmore. Yeah, it's like Mount Rushmore, but with Universal Monster faces on the rock face. You know, you got your Frank, Wolfman, Mummy, and Drac all spooking it up on this little version of Mount Rushmore. So I thought it'd be fun to do a few of these Mount Rushmores, like this Count Rushmore. And today I'm going to start it off with Final Girls. That's right, I'm going to pick the 4 coolest Final Girls that belong on at least my Mount Rushmore of Final Girls. I think we all know what at least one of them is going to be, but what are the other 3 going to be? And what are ones you would put on your Final Girl Mount Rushmore? So, with all that and more, stick around. All right, y'all, before we get started on this amazing Mount Rushmore of Final Girls, if you're new to my channel and this brought you here and you're curious, like, what's this video about? Please do me a favor right now, hit like, subscribe, smack the bell, all that good stuff. It really helps the algorithms of people wanting to see videos like this find my channel. Now, let's talk about the Final Girl. What is a Final Girl? Well, let's break that down first. In case you don't know, I'm sure many of us know what that is, but in case you don't, basically a Final Girl, the term was coined by this author, Carol J. Clover, in her book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, Gender in the Modern Horror Film. The Final Girl is basically the main female lead character of a horror movie that survives all the way through the end due to her resilience and her resourcefulness and her ability to confront and outsmart the killer, usually after witnessing the deaths of all of her friends who were apparently not as smart and resilient against this killer. And while traditionally, the Final Girl was portrayed as a pure and innocent girl, but now modern Final Girls are more resilient, intelligent, they kick ass, they get the job done, and can usually take care of business on their own. Now, in classic slasher movies, these characters do tend to stay away from sex, drugs, alcohol, and confronting her peers, which tends to lead to death in these movies. So let's just jump right into this Final Girl Mount Rushmore. And we're going to lead this off with the number 4 Final Girl. And we're going to go with Nancy Thompson, portrayed by Heather Langenkamp from the original Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Nancy tends to be a very go-to quintessential version of what a Final Girl is, as she is the lone sole survivor of that original amazing classic Nightmare on Elm Street, populated by the wicked killer Freddy Krueger. In this film, Nancy is a high school student who is targeted by Freddy, while her friends are killed off one by one in their sleep. Since Nancy is sort of presented as a more like relatable girl next door type, it becomes more compelling when she just sort of steps up to the plate and gets all this courage to confront and eventually take down Freddy Krueger. Now, another thing about Nancy is her family life. She's sort of surrounded by not the perfect family. Her mother's an alcoholic and her dad is this, sort of hard-ass police detective. And they don't tend to believe what she's saying because it does sound pretty fantastical. So she has to take matters into her own hands, set some booby traps for old Fred, and eventually pull Freddy out of the dream world and into reality. Now, one thing Nancy realizes because of her resourcefulness is the one thing that can take down Freddy is like the fear. That's what gives him power. So she decides to suck it up, show no fear, and this sort of weakens him so that she can bring him out into the real world and presumably defeat him. Now, I'm not going to talk about how Nancy returns in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and what they do to her there. We're going to stick with the fact that she was tough as nails here in the first movie and does survive, making her the first on the Mount Rushmore of Final Girls, Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street. All right, next up on the Mount Rushmore of Final Girls is one. We're going to get into a little sci-fi horror on this one, but she is definitely one of the best. And I'm going with Ellen Ripley from 1979's Alien. Now, despite Ripley being in a sci-fi horror film, she still embodies all those great traditional tropes of a Final Girl that are more traditionally found in those slasher films. The gist of this one is, after all of her crewmates are destroyed by this alien creature aboard her ship, the Nostromo, she is the last girl left with her cat, Jonesy. Now, one thing that leads to this is there's a quarantine protocol that happens on this ship that she is adamant about maintaining. She's not opening the doors for anybody. Oh, you could let something in. They're like, come on, let us in. And, you know, against her judgment, they demand to be let in. And it is their actions that cause this creature to come on board the ship. Whereas Ripley, she knew to follow protocol. Unfortunately, lesser minds prevailed, and their doom was sealed. Now, even though in this film, this crew is filled with dudes, man. There's one other woman here as well, but they're not really sexualized, which is good. It's not that kind of film like your little teen horror movie from the 80s, so to speak. But she still has to butt heads against all these dudes that think they're right. And in the end, she was right to have quarantined that ship, which they didn't listen to. And now their doom is sealed. And due to her intelligence, she's able to figure out a way to confront the alien and come out victorious in the end. And it's because of this fortitude that I put Ellen Ripley right here on the next spot on the Mount Rushmore of Final Girls. The third final girl I am putting on this Mount Rushmore is considered one of the most iconic final girls of all time, and that is Sidney Prescott from the Scream franchise. Oh, look, Sidney Prescott is... I love the Scream franchise, and not only is she a great final girl in this first film, she just continues on in this franchise to become a more hardened, kick-ass final girl that she's still chugging along today. Hopefully we'll get her back in the saddle soon up on the screen, and we'll see how she fares in the next film. But in this first film, Scream, oh man. As you may know, in this film, unlike other traditional slasher films where there's a single killer, Sidney has to confront and survive multiple individuals donning that ghost face mask trying to kill her. Now, one thing that does stand out for Sidney that's a little bit different from some of these other final girls that are more pure and abstinent and they don't have sex. Well, Sidney has sex, y'all, in that first film and still survives because of her fortitude and intelligence, proving that she can still be a multi-dimensional character while still triumphing over evil. So in the end, we can agree that Sidney Prescott, as slasher movies were starting to fade off, Scream brought them back, and she also brought forth a stronger, more resilient type of final girl that combined intelligence and a deep emotional arc that still resonates with her fans today. And because of that, I'm going to put Sidney Prescott in the next spot on the Mount Rushmore of final girls. And finally, last up, but certainly not least on this Mount Rushmore of final girls is the one we all must have on this Mount Rushmore, and that is, of course, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in 1978's Halloween. Laurie is the archetype of the last woman standing in all of these slasher-type movies. She basically is what many people would coin as the quintessential final girl. Now, even though she is saved by Dr. Loomis at the end, her character does evoke great bravery and strength throughout the entire film, especially when confronting Michael Myers. And these characteristics will stay with the character of Laurie Strode through all the films because her character has evolved from being this vulnerable girl to a tough-as-nails survivor who controls her own fate. And this is why audiences love her character, Laurie Strode. So let's put her in there as the final face on my Mount Rushmore of final girls, Laurie Strode from 1978's Halloween. That's going to do it, my friends. That is my Mount Rushmore of final girls. Now, if you were to put one together yourself, let me know in the comments below, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore? I got a slew of these coming, y'all. This is just the first one in a little series I'm just going to call the Mount Rushmore of fill in the blank. That's going to do it for now, y'all. If this video brought you here and you enjoyed it, thank you so much for checking it out. Do me a favor, though. Hit like, subscribe, smack the bell, leave a comment, and share it with all of your friends. It really helps those pesky YouTube algorithms. Till next time, enjoy this Mount Rushmore of final girls. Thank you to all my Cafe members for their support. And if you'd like to be a Cafe member to help support the channel, please consider hitting that join button now.